for July 14th, 2022 at 6:08 p.m. Dr. Thomas, if you would conduct roll call for us.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Gallagher,
Here.
Mrs. Davis,
Here.
Dr. Yeager,
Here.
Dr. Dykeman, Dr. Anderson,
Here.
Dr. Gant,
Here.
Ms. Hull, and Dr. Maddox.
All right, so we do have a quorum. Dr. Dykeman will not be joining us tonight. Dr. Maddox will be here. She is delayed. Ms. Davis, do you have a question?
We're good.
Okay. All right, so if you would, join us if you're able to stand as we say the Pledge of Allegiance and have a moment of silence. I'm sorry, first let's have a moment of silence and then we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, and if you're able to stand, join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you. We will move forward to our public comment portion of the agenda. Based on my records, we have one person here for public comments, and that is Jamie Mays. And just as a reminder for public comments, public speakers have 3 minutes, and personal attacks will not be tolerated. If they do occur, I will ask that you discontinue your speech. Thank you.
I want to keep the information private to protect the child and the family, but I do want to share some details about something that happened this past week. I'm happy to provide the details privately to individual board members. I received a call for help this week from a Ccsd family. This child was multiply marginalized, Black, disabled, and temporarily displaced and in between housing arrangements. The sort of child a district committed to equity would want to ensure was a supported, uplifted, and cared for child. Instead, that child and their family were grossly mistreated by a Ccsd department director who took it upon themselves during the summer to unenroll the child from school, despite the family never communicating with the district or school that their living situation would be changing. Why did a district leader feel empowered to Google search the tax records of a family only to use the information obtained to unenroll a child? Further, why did this district leader steamroll forward with their cruel plan despite the earnest efforts being made by the parent to resolve the housing problem? The parent was not prepared for a conflict or a battle with the school district and felt shut down and defeated. What recourse does a vulnerable family have when they are up against a department head who wields their power over them in such a disrespectful way? Parents of children who receive special education services are regularly pitted against district staff, not because the relationship is inherently antagonistic, but because of the way the department is run. Families are seen less as equal partners and more as adversaries. Understandably, Mr. Gaskins and Dr. Thomas were both disappointed and alarmed by this information when I emailed them earlier this week, but Mr. Gaskins quickly began the process to get the child re-enrolled. I am grateful for his help and attention. I am angry and dumbfounded that a Black, disabled, and essentially homeless child was unenrolled from school over the summer while the parent was actively communicating with the district and trying to solve the problem. The process for unenrolling a child shouldn't be something that one person has the power to just pull the lever on unchecked. Why did this situation require a white woman with a reputation for being relentless to step in and intervene in order for this one child to get the public education they are owed? How many other people have experienced this and don't know how to find a solution? The way this situation was handled is inhumane. It's not just a singular mistake, but a textbook example of systemic racism and ableism, and it needs to be addressed openly and transparently so that we can ensure that steps are in place so that this district can live up to its equity commitments. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move forward to item 3, and that is to amend and/or adopt the agenda.
I so move that we adopt the agenda as already amended. Oh, okay.
Thought we were amending it. Are we amending it?
I'm trying to update my assembly to see if it was moved up. It has not been. So we need to amend the,
Okay. Do you want to make that?
we need to amend the agenda to move item
I think you said
13.
move item 13
to
to become
8.3.
second.
All right, we have a motion to move item 13 to item 8.3 in a second. All in favor of adopting the agenda with that amendment, if you would, raise your hands and say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries 5, yes. All right, we'll move forward to the board president's report. I'm just going to provide a brief update on the naming of the space for the Nunnallys, and I'm going to ask Dr. Anderson just to give a brief update on an email that Dr. Thomas sent to us. So we've seen some of the email exchanges a couple of months ago, actually several months ago. The board identified an ad hoc committee to identify individuals who have contributed significantly to the district, as well as to move forward with naming a space after the Nunnallys. And after the work of that ad hoc committee, we each were asked to share some names, but I do think at this time, one of the things that Dr. Maddox mentioned is possibly putting that on hold. And so I sent out an email with that information included, but we still do have the work ahead of us of moving forward with naming the facility after, or a space in the facility after the Nunnallys. And so that is the update that I have. In the email that I sent out, I think it said August, but that was incorrect. I sent that before I actually saw the other emails that August would be too soon because of getting any type of information or recognition or plaques. And so the updated corrected date is in September, that September board meeting. So that is the only update I have. Are there any questions about that before I share the floor with Dr. Anderson? So in essence, in a nutshell, we are holding on the name, identifying the names of individuals who have contributed significantly. That we also sort of talked some about that in our meeting as well. That seed was sort of sown from an email a while ago from someone sharing some history, and then Ms. Davis shared some additional history, and there's a lot of history and a lot of stories out there of people who have contributed significantly to the district, and particularly during that time of integration. And so, we still have, we can certainly still recognize people. It just may be that it may be in a different way. We may need to pick it back up, look at it a little bit differently. But right now, my recommendation would be, I would be in agreement with Dr. Maddox that we place that on hold, and that we do continue with the ad hoc's recommendation and the conversation that we've had to recognize the nonalies in September and not August. Okay. All right. Dr. Anderson, if you could give us that brief update.
So I know you all remember the conversations that we had surrounding the organizational audit. And at the time that we had that conversation, this was several months ago, so if I need to jog anyone's memory, let me know. But at the time that we had that conversation, we asked Dr. Thomas and her staff to approach USHCA because they did the audit for the human resources, and they did what we found at the time to be a good job. And so that took place, and USHCA has agreed to do an organizational audit, or to at least provide us with more details about what that would entail, what costs it would be, et cetera. And so if you all as a board are wanting to move forward, then we can go ahead and move forward with getting more information from USHCA regarding that organizational audit.
Okay,
Any
so I don't know if
questions?
it's me or the new microphones, but you're in a, and it could be, again, maybe it's my hearing, my daughter's
Okay,
promised
you're
me.
struggling. So we need to probably face forward. Does it help when we are, okay.
Okay. So, again, I'm hearing echoes when you're talking, and so it's taking me a little longer to understand what you're saying. I have no idea what you just said. Yeah. You want me to? Would you please?
So several months ago, is that better? Several months ago, we had a conversation
Okay.
about conducting an organizational audit, primarily of central office, just to understand better everyone's role and also understand where redundancy is taking place or perhaps inefficiencies, et cetera. That conversation happened, I don't fully remember, but around March, I believe. And so we asked Dr. Thomas and her staff to reach out to, at that time, USHCA was doing a human resources audit, and when they did their presentation on USHCA's findings, the board seemed pretty impressed with the process and their findings. And so Dr. Thomas and her staff offered to approach USHCA to see if they would provide that similar service for the organizational audit. That conversation took place between Dr. Thomas and her staff and USHCA, and they have offered to have further conversations surrounding what that process looks like, what the cost would be, et cetera, if we are wanting to proceed with doing an organizational audit. So the question now is, does the board feel like we are in that same position that we were in earlier in the year, that we do in fact want to move forward with looking towards doing an organizational audit, or do we want to revisit the conversation altogether?
Okay, great, thank you. That was, I got a lot of what you heard. This time I got all of what you heard, so thank you. So are we at a point of discussion, or, okay.
Dr. Yeager?
I was just going to say, I think at least I haven't moved since March, so I think I'm still in support of this, at least finding out how much they're going to cost and the timetable.
I concur. But I do have a question too. So I would like to see the scope of the audit and what we're looking for defined before we undertake that project.
So we did have an initial proposal, and I just reshared that with Dr. Gant and Dr. Anderson. They haven't had a chance to look at it, but they can then share with you all what the initial scope would be and the initial cost. And so if the board, if you all want to share that, Dr. Gant, this weekend, and then after everyone has had a chance to look over that, and if there's some items that aren't included that you all would like to see included, we can look and work with Dr. Blankenship to add those items as well. So there is already some information available that'll give us a starting point for that conversation.
Excellent.
Okay, so what I hear is that that is something that the board is still interested in pursuing, with the understanding that we'll read through that, the information that's been shared, and if there are any collective or suggested changes that need to be made, we would share those.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we are going to move forward with the superintendent's report.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. Mine is very brief. First, I just want to thank those of you who were able to join us for our summer school graduation this afternoon. We had 9 students who graduated from our 2 combined high schools, and we're very proud of our graduates. It was a nice ceremony. You could tell that the graduates were excited, the families and friends that were there were excited, and so we're very proud to be able to add that group to this year's cohort of graduates. So we just wanted to acknowledge that celebration that took place earlier today. I would also like to acknowledge Dr. Lawrence Harris. This is his last board meeting with us, and so we did have a reception for him put on by his department this afternoon, and so I would be remiss if I just didn't say thank you for your amazing service to Clark County. We appreciate you. Yes, I will join that. I think Dr. Harris started with us when he was maybe 12, it seems like. And so he has done amazing work. He started at Clark Central High School and then went to the Athens Community Career Academy and then joined us at the board and has led our community engagement and strategic partnerships work and has done a phenomenal job. I think it seems like everyone in Athens is connected to him in some way. And so you have left some large shoes to fill, and we just want you to know how much we appreciate your contributions in the leadership and how you truly poured into the hearts of kids. You can tell, we always say you can teach skill, but you can't teach will, and so your will and commitment to do what's best for children will forever be remembered in Clark County, so thank you, Dr. Harris. And my last thing is just we have our new teacher orientation that will be in your board update tomorrow. But we always invite our board members, if you're available, to join us for lunch, meet our new teachers. So that is July 26th at Clark Central. We begin the day there at 8, but the lunch is at 11:30. And again, you don't have to worry. It'll be in the board update tomorrow, provided by Dr. Blankenship. But I just wanted to publicly remind and share with you, not remind, but share with you that that new teacher orientation is on July 26th. And we've had the opportunity, we've done it a little differently this year, where teachers could come in at different times throughout the summer for their orientation, and so I've been able to pop into a few of those, and we have just a group that's really excited about being with our kids, and we always share that, you know, it's hard work, but it's heart work, and our expectation of commitment to our children and commitment to the success of what we do and what our kids deserve. So that is July 26th, and that is all I have, Dr. Gant, Dr. Anderson.
All right, thank you. Moving forward to the action to approve an Ad-Hoc committee. I tried to provide some context, I think in the email that I sent regarding the work that we have before us. I know that we are still finding our way without committees, and there's still some work that needs to be done as it relates to our outdated committees. And so I do want to just briefly defer to Dr. Yeager. Thank you, Dr. Yeager, for actually, and team, and Dr. Harris, just for going through those policies and identifying ones that really are in need of review. But that is what this action item is about. Dr. Yeager, is there anything you would like to add?
Thank you, Dr. Gant. I noticed that the ad hoc committee is being narrowed to just the 9 oldest policies. I thought we had talked about the 9 oldest and then the 45 or so that are 5 years old and need to be reviewed. Are we narrowing it just to the ones that are really, really old?
I think it's up to the board
Okay.
as we define the scope.
Yeah.
I think according to policy, when we set the ad hoc committee, we identify the timeline and the scope of the work. And so if we want to include those, I think we should actually include all of those, but that would be
That would
a
be my
board decision.
recommendation, is that we don't form one and exist for a month and then have to form another one to do the other 45. But I'm happy, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But I think one committee that gets familiar with those, about 54, I can do math, 54 policies that are more than 5 years old. That includes the 9 that are very old, that we somehow missed last year, and then the 45 that are all coming up this year, like 2015, 2016 policies, 2017 policies. But yeah, so again, we did a lot of work last year and the year before, covering, I think, 200-ish something, 250 policies, and everything has sort of stalled since y'all dismantled the committees. And I understand why, but I think given the experience of trying to do policy work as a board of 9 at the last couple of meetings, it's been really challenging, and I think we do need to find, I don't think we want to try to do those 45 or 54 policies as a full board, because it's just too hard. It would take us many, many hours, so.
Okay.
Does that give you enough background? I don't know exactly what you wanted me to say, but.
Yep, that's enough information. I want to open the floor to other board members for questions or comments, and then I'll open the floor for a motion.
So I did get an email, I thought, from Ms. Bonas, is that right? About addressing the policies that are past due or time for renewal, whatever. And so I'm anxious to see the process we put in place work. We're always going to have policies that expire because they're never all done on the same year. And there's probably a calendar somewhere among all of the things that we've collected that tells us by years which ones are going to come up for renewal. I'd like to see that process work, and I don't know how it works, other than what I've seen on the piece of paper. But to do an ad hoc committee as we're trying to move into a new process seems counterproductive to me. And I think we'll be pulling from the same resources. And so will the ad hoc committee only address these policies, or will they address the ongoing current policies? I think it has to work to a point that whatever engine is running is running on a predictable course at the very least, so that if something comes up, everybody doesn't have to drop this and jump to turn directions. I'd like to see the new process work in resolving the issue of the ones that are past due now. That's my position. But yeah, I don't want to, the last thing I want to see us do is do an ad hoc for 9 and then extend the ad hoc for another 9 or another 45. I think that would be, I don't know, I don't think it's counterproductive, but I think it definitely says we haven't really given the new process a chance to work on that.
So, yeah, may I reply, or may I at least comment?
Yeah, let me check
Okay.
in with a couple of other
Check in with
people
our
to
best.
see, and then we can circle back around. Other thoughts?
If the the policies that Dr. Yeager is speaking of will be coming up very soon with the 5 years, I would like to see that we go ahead and take care of those and then begin the new process and not have to revisit that, again. So I see the advantage of working through those that are coming up for review while we have an ad hoc committee, and then following through after that.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Maddox. Others, Ms. Gallagher, Dr. Anderson, any thoughts about this?
I have just a statement. I think it's important that we, one, see the process through, as Ms. Davis mentioned. It took the staff several months to kind of figure out how this new process would work. We've got a flow chart, we've tried it a couple of times, and now that we know that that system can work, we need to see it through. But also,
Ms. Bonet has a lot of work in front of her with these 60 policies, and I feel like, as an attorney, that she's quite competent in doing this work, and it would behoove us as a board to let that efficiency and effectiveness that she will bring to the table, we should give her a chance to see it through. And then if it's not working after several months and we're still in this position, then we can revisit an ad hoc, but we haven't given this whole thing a chance to work yet.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Ms. Gallagher, any additional comments?
If we do go with the ad hoc, like what is I'd be interested in learning what the follow-up process is for the entire board, because ad hoc is not the entire board, so the information still has to get shared back with the board, which encourages more discussion. I'm guaranteed to have a question. And so how long does that process, would the ad hoc process be from start to finish?
Okay. Thank you. I'm going to try to answer that quickly and then come back to you, Dr. Yeager. I know you had a comment. The ad hoc process is as long as we identify. And so we identify the charge, we identify the work, and we identify the timeline. And then the responsibility falls on the committee to get that work done within that amount of time and to report it back, to the board. And the board picks up with those revised policies. And so that is determined by the board. To answer your question specifically, that timeline is determined by the board. Dr. Yeager?
Yeah, so I can only really comment on what we did before, which was when we had a very large number of them. We spent hours in policy committee. There were three board members and whoever staff were relevant. And then we also invited the new board members at the time that wanted to participate, the incoming onboarding board members, and they chimed in too. And there were lots of sort of 2- and 3-person meetings talking about the issues. And then we tried to summarize the issues. What are the choices we need to make? And then share those with the board so that the board could then vote or decide whether they wanted to go one way or the other on the policies. And that's what I would try to do this time too. I certainly got better at the process at the beginning. It was more having those conversations and then just kind of giving the result. And then over the year, I think I did get better at sort of explaining what the issues were to the rest of the board. And I think whoever takes charge of this, that's a critical piece of the puzzle that we learned last year is needed, is to have that sort of thought process. So we talked to so-and-so and they recommended this thing, we changed this thing, and we talked to someone else and they think it works better this way, and have that more transparent so you all can then make the decision or think about it in advance. What I don't think can happen is that we have all of those discussions with all of the staff and with all the various people as a board in a board meeting. And Ms. Bonas can do that, I guess, one-on-one, but then that leaves the board completely out of the process, which is okay if that's what everybody wants to do, but I think it does kind of leave us out of the discussion, and so things will then come to us and we'll be like, no, wait a minute, what about this, and this, which is kind of what happened with the code this past month. We had public comment and we had lots of board comment and lots of meetings and lots of conversations behind the scenes, and that seems much less transparent than sort of having a policy committee that's open to whoever wants to see what we're doing, and then we have a summary that we then give to the whole board, which would be that would be the standard in my mind. And then we can move through them pretty efficiently, I think. So I would say for 54 policies, I would give us, Ms. Bonas, you think we could do it in 3 months? It depends on the availability of the staff, really, on each of the different subsections.
All right. Okay, so I'm going to open the floor for a motion for this item 6, the action to approve the ad hoc committee.
You do want a motion?
The floor is open for a motion.
I move that we create an ad hoc committee to handle the 54 policies that are more than 5 years old.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Dr. Yeager, a second by Dr. Anderson. All in favor of approving the ad hoc committee to review or revise the 54 policies? If you would, raise your hands and say aye. Aye. And those opposed?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, I noted 3 in favor and 2 opposed. Okay. Mr. Pruitt, if we want to, someone has more questions, at this place, we've already taken the vote of 3-2, but Ms. Gallagher has more questions. Do we re-vote over? Do we suspend the vote? How do we get her questions answered and re-vote again?
Have I lost basic math skills? Aren't there 6 up there? 3-2?
Mm-hmm.
Was there 1 abstention?
I'm not sure. Well, yeah, she did, because she didn't vote. She didn't say the words, I'm abstaining, but she didn't vote, and she also has questions.
Okay, well, so you've already started the vote, so you got 3-2 and 1 abstention. So if I remember right, we changed the policy so abstentions do not count towards the vote count, so actually a 3-2 vote passes. Okay. Now, I was just noticing I didn't hear in the motion how many board members are going to be on this committee or who they're going to be. I don't know if that's going to be delegated to the president of the board or what.
Okay. Does that need to be in the motion?
Well, I mean, unless everybody understands it the same way, but it seems like that would be good, just so everybody knows how it's being done, sure.
Okay, so do we need to redo the vote?
I just take a subsequent motion to do that.
Okay. So from my understanding, the motion has passed,
Right.
but there's a substitute motion that would be in order to identify who's going to be on the committee and the other details like the timeline.
Well, it doesn't have to be a substitute motion, just a second motion to fill out those
Okay.
details.
Okay. So the motion has passed for the ad hoc committee, but there will be, I'll open the floor for a second motion for the details of the ad hoc committee, and then, yeah. Oh, okay, that was your question. Okay, okay, and then with that motion, during the discussion period, if there are any follow-up questions,
So
we can go
I
there.
didn't understand the question that you said, that your question was already answered. What was that question? Okay. Okay, so the vote then was to have the ad hoc committee.
Yep,
And so the policy says that you would appoint the ad hoc committee, instructing it with the timeline, with the expected outcome.
that's right.
And so this ad hoc committee, is it only board members? Or are we not at that point yet?
It's a committee, just like our other committees, so it would consist of the identified board members, and I would imagine the staff that Dr. Thomas identifies as holding the role of policy.
Yeah, the policy says the board creates ad hoc committees from its membership. So that's what I was suggesting, is fleshing out how many and who.
Okay.
Staff wouldn't be members of the committee. They're staff that assist the committee.
Yeah, policy BBC is the board committee policy that addresses this committee. So if you're in Assembly, you can pull it up.
Can
Want me to read
you
it?
speak a little bit louder for me?
Sorry, it's policy BBC. The board may, from time to time, create special ad hoc committees from its own membership for study and fact-finding. It shall be the responsibility of the president to appoint the board members, to special committees whenever necessary. The president shall outline the duties, responsibilities, and timeline of each committee at the time of appointment. This is the policy y'all passed in December 2021 while I was gone.
Okay, and so the ad hoc committee has passed. At this point, I think what I heard Mr. Pruitt say is that I can open the floor for another motion, just so we'll have clarity around who will be on the committee, so who those members are, and identify the duties of the committee as well as the timeline. So who will be on the committee? Are there volunteers? No volunteers? Okay. Okay. So Dr. Yeager, are there any others? Ms. Hull? Okay. Okay, good. So 3. That would be great. We don't have to, but that would be great, that number. So Dr. Yeager, Ms. Gallagher, and Ms. Hull. And as far as the duties, specifically, the responsibility of the committee will be to review, draft any potential changes. Of course, all of this comes back to the board of those policies that, those 54 policies, I think it was. And then the timeline, as far as a realistic timeline, in my head, I have 2 months, but I want to be realistic too for that committee. Ms. Gallagher, Dr. Yeager, Dr. Thomas, Ms. Bonas, is that practical? Is that reasonable? If it's not, that's fine. Just suggest something differently, and then I'll.
I'm looking at Ms. Bonas, but I think she's kind of also at a place where, I don't know if it was Ms. Davis or Dr. Anderson referenced, not having had a chance to kind of do the process yet, so to be able to,
Yeah, I'm unable to estimate how long it will take.
right.
All right. Thank you.
But
thank
I
you
might
for-
appreciate 6 weeks to get familiar with the process.
I think if we think about what the board can handle at any given meeting, in the past, more than 10 to 15 on a long list has been a challenge for the board to have discussion during the work session and then decision to put up for public comment, or to put up and approve. More than about 15 per meeting. So I think if we think about that in terms of 15 per meeting, if we have 60, that's 4 meetings. So we could say August, September, October, and November, and hopefully have everything cleaned up and done and happy by December. So I would say we should probably give ourselves until December to get all through 54 of them.
And Ms. Bonas, were you saying 4 to 6 weeks for you to kind of get yourself acclimated and then start the ad hoc after that? Or were you saying are you asking just for some time to get your role and your feet under you and then begin with the ad hoc, say, in a month? Or what? I want to be clear on your request.
I think that would be great. I think it's, the work session is August 4th, which is in like 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks. So we may not get started by August, but after that session, I think we could get rolling. So yes, 3 weeks to look at all the policies, begin to talk to the people who are implicated in them. But December seems like a reasonable timeline. This says 9 policies. Are we doing the 9 or are we doing the 54?
54.
Okay.
And it's important to note that this does not cancel out the other policies that come before us that are not in this category. So this isn't like an exclusive thing where just because we have the ad hoc, the other,
Right.
policies that we
There's
are
the
looking at.
equity policy that's still a work in progress, but the ad hoc committee would not address that.
That's
Correct.
my understanding.
Can you
Correct.
say that, what was that?
The other policies, the equity policy, for example, is still sitting out there. That separate policy creation, that has to be separate, is what I understood.
Yes,
Correct.
because the work of this ad
ad
hoc committee,
rescind if necessary, the old policies.
Yep.
That will be so, okay, so the ones that you're working are the ones that expire this year, or the 5-year is just this year, 2022.
Correct. So I sent out an Excel file to the board, and there were 9 that are older than 2011. There are 45 that are older than 2017. So that adds up to 54 older than 5 years. I'm sorry to say that there are 33 that are 2018, so there will be 33 to do next year. That'll be more than 5 years old next year. So this process doesn't go away, as you mentioned, Ms. Davis. There's a lot of policies that we've done in cycles, and so every year there will probably be between 25 and 50 policies to review every year.
but I think if we know that in advance, we can.
You do know that.
If we know that in advance, planning for next year, we can, as we're planning our board meetings, we can plan that schedule so they're more integrated into the meetings, like those that will expire next year, for instance.
Sure.
So we're not necessarily at a place where we have an upcoming visit and we have like 50 policies that we're still working through. So I'm going to open the floor for a motion. The specifics are, the members are Dr. Yeager, Ms. Gallagher, Ms. Hull. The duties are to review, revise those 54 policies only, and then the time with a timeline of 6 months. If you finish before 6 months, that's great. But
I do have a question.
yes, Ms. Gallagher.
So are there, I know it says review and revise, but are there, I haven't done this before, so are there guidelines on how to review and revise policies that are already based on what y'all did before for Cognia? Like how to go through this many policies?
I
There
can tell you what
guidelines?
we did before.
She made
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you what we did before. So we knew which ones we were going to address. This was with Dr. Harris, and we would have 10 or 12. Dr. Harris would make sure that the relevant staff members would come to the meeting. We'd all read them in advance. There would be some emails back and forth about what needed to be changed, what was old, what needed, and the staff would present to us what they thought needed to be changed, and then we'd have a conversation and what the board members thought needed to be changed or not. That would all get kind of summarized. We'd have a vote and move it up to the board. And then there was usually a step somewhere in there, hopefully sooner rather than later, where legal gave their advice. Mr. Pruitt or Andrea would chime in and say, well, this is what the law says you have to do or not do. So there was always a legal review as well as a staff review and a board member review. And that would all get kind of merged together and sent up for the full board to look at. And then the full board would decide to accept or not accept the revisions.
Okay, and then my other question is, so after this time period for the ad hoc committee, will we, during this time, are we putting something in place so that we don't get behind policies? Or are we waiting until after this ad hoc committee meets?
I think that's something that, the board can be clear about for individuals that are going to be taking on the responsibility of the policy process, that if we want to be sure that we are taking that forward look, for instance, at the policies that do expire next year and integrating those into our agenda meetings. And we can start, technically, we can do that at any time. We can start that now, because we'll be able to sort of say, okay, these are the 20 policies that expire next year. Let's go ahead and put 2 on our regular board member, on our regular meeting agenda.
So we don't really have a person doing that. This is a district responsibility, the
That's
operations
right.
responsibility. And so in my 10 years on the board, the person that was our liaison at the district kept that list and kept that calendar of what was going on. We fell behind, I get that, but yeah, that was not a board responsibility, but one that we asked the superintendent to take responsibility for.
And so in the meantime, if that's something that we can take note of, and those policies that will be expiring next year, you know, so that we're not in a place next year of if we want to do an ad hoc, that's one thing, but feeling, you know, the urgency of doing one is not as high.
And that was one of the discussions that we've had, just about setting up a calendar with the process of just being able to do a regular, consistent review of policies so that we don't get ourselves in the position of being this far behind moving forward.
Dr. Myers had something in place years ago, but I don't know what happened to it, so here we are. She left.
All right, well, the floor, do we have a motion for that second with those three specific things? Okay. Yeah, okay, did you get all your questions answered, Ms. Gallagher? Okay. All right, the floor is open for a motion.
Well, when do I ask this question? Can I ask the question now?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so before we put that motion out, I heard specifically that this was going to be an invitation to our elected board members that will be coming on board. Does this motion, this ad hoc committee need to acknowledge that that group will be a part of this committee? Or-
No.
No.
I mean, I think they can attend from my understanding.
Yeah, it's obviously an open meeting, so they, along with any other member of the public, can attend.
Except board members.
But actually, until sworn in, they couldn't vote anyway, so.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we don't lose sight of that particular thing, because I think it was valuable.
Okay, the floor is open for a motion.
I just want to ask if people would speak up. Maybe it's just me, but I can't hear down here. So if everyone
Okay.
would just please speak into your mics. I'm missing the discussion.
Okay. All right, the floor is open for a motion.
Shall I try again?
Go ahead.
All right, so I move that we form an ad hoc committee to address the 54 policies that are older than 5 years old in the next 6 months by the end of December, by the end of the year. And I understand that I will be a member of this committee, Ms. Gallagher, and recommending with her permission, Attorney Hull be a member of this ad hoc committee. And then we invite the participation of onboarding new members.
Okay. Thank you. So we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any follow-up questions before we take action? Okay, all in favor of approving the motion before us with those specifics, if you would, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, and those opposed, if you would show the same signs.
Aye.
Okay, and so we have, was that 4-2? Okay, so that motion passes 4-2. We will move forward to item 7. And this is our policy information. Dr. Thomas, I'm going to turn the floor over to you for any additional updates.
Yes, ma'am. So we have 2 policies that Ms. Bonas is going to present. One to be adopted and approved, policy JCDA, the Student Code of Conduct, and exhibit JCDA E1. And we have gotten feedback from our board already on most of these, and I think she's spoken to a couple of board members individually to address some concerns and thoughts. And we've also gotten public comment on those that have been shared. And then policy IKBB, the Divisive Concepts Complaint Resolutions Process. And on that one, I just wanted to clarify that this is not the policy around divisive concepts, but it is the required state policy on how we will receive complaints, and the state has required, and Ms. Bonas will go into that, but has required that we have a policy in place by August on how you accept complaints about any divisive concepts. So this is not the state legislation around this subject, but our need to have a policy on how we receive those complaints. And Ms. Bonas, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, well, good evening. It's nice to see you all. Thank you for inviting me to work on policy with you all. I am very excited. I am sad that Dr. Harris is leaving, but him and Ms. Tillman have filled me in, and he, in his final meeting, is taking notes on anything that comes up. So tonight, the Student Code of Conduct and Divisive Concepts. First, the Student Code of Conduct. It is now posted on Assembly under the meetings, the cleaned up, no highlighted version. There were changes that were made based on the public comment and some conversations, and I tried to summarize all of those that went in the board update last Friday. In addition, there is one other thing to note, which is that with respect to the drugs other than alcohol and tobacco, the 2 boxes for the out-of-school suspension for severity level 1 have been removed, so that is no longer in there. There were additional structural changes. There's a QR code on the first or second page that invites parents and high school students to let us know that they have received the code of conduct. And then we deleted some operational language at the end. So the table of contents in that version that's on Assembly is not right, but everything else should reflect all of the changes that we have heard. So that is all I have with respect to the Student Code of Conduct. If there are questions or further comments, we can discuss, and Dr. Harris can take notes. Yes.
So I tried to read 47 pages as a parent, and I was wondering, what was I supposed to do with this document that is so large and the language is so difficult to just process quickly? I know that by law we have to do a code of conduct, is that right?
Certainly yes, okay. Law and policy.
And does it also specify what we have to put in the code of conduct? Because it reads very punitively to me, like that's the concern that I had today, and I just read it fresh because I wanted to read it fresh, and that was what impacted me. So I'm curious as to, is there a way that, and not to change this one because we're way too far down the road on that, but I would like to make sure that we have written it at a level no greater than a 7th grader to understand the language that we're using in this document so that it will be meaningful to parents, because they shouldn't have to pull out a dictionary to understand what we're trying to say. And I felt several times as I was reading that, it's like, this is really stilted, it's very challenging, and I don't really want to think hard about something that's this important to me. So I'm looking at, and I'm asking us to make sure that all documents that we're producing for public consumption have some level of understanding so that it doesn't require somebody with a 2-year degree to understand what we're saying. So that's my request.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Davis. Others?
This one's less for you, Ms. Bonas, but more for everybody else. Are we, instead of I know we have the Title I meeting where everyone gets this information, are we being intentional about making sure that parents understand what the code of conduct is, and then how to apply it, how to use it as a resource when advocating for their children? Like if something does come up, how to pull out this book and say, well, you do have options for discipline. This is what they are.
I'm going to receive that as a suggestion rather than a question, because that's how I've learned to interpret you in our love language, Ms. Gallagher. And so that is something that can be embedded. I know it happens differently in different buildings. And so what I'm hearing you say is that there's a need for consistency with that. I believe, and I'm looking at Mr. Gaskins, but with us now having full-time family engagement specialists, I think that's something that we can easily put on their agenda as work to make sure it happens there and also at our Title I meetings. But I think that's a good use of our family engagement specialist. Ms. Bonas has worked this year to put a QR code on the code of conduct. So once families have had an opportunity to engage with it, they can scan and let us know. And also there's a code where our older students can scan and say that I've had this read, but looking at how we use advisement periods and other opportunities like first day of school, working with parents even during conference days to make sure that their questions are answered. But that is something that we will work with our family engagement specialists on, and I am writing that down. You're welcome.
Can we put it on Audible too?
That's going to have to be a long-term goal, Ms. Davis, but I will make note of that as well for my predecessor.
Thank you for your successor.
All right, any other questions or feedback about our code of conduct? The only thing I'll mention is I'm hopeful that the process can start, even though I know that, like, I think this semester, it probably started early in the semester. But I really think that something this important, one, it's never complete. You know, when you're talking about discipline and climate and culture, you know, it's something that sort of shifts, but that the work starts earlier, you know? Because I think for the past 3 years when we've gotten to this place, I do recognize this year it has started earlier with the task force, but I think that gives us also the space to include other stakeholders. And with something as critical as discipline that's on everybody's mind, that really is probably the operational definition like itself of like climate and culture, it is something that I think has to go beyond the district and beyond even our LSGTs, like in communities. Like people really have to have their minds wrapped around the type of culture that we're trying to create in schools and the type of behaviors that we're looking for and how we, as partners, build that. This is not just a school district document. It's because discipline is not just school district work. It's, you know, it's family, parent, and community work. And so as a result, that process, my only goal and ask for the past couple of years that we start that when school starts or the summer, like now, where before, you know, yeah, because it's, I think all of us have heard, and even more so during the pandemic, that discipline, it is a problem, you know, and I don't think we're the only county, but discipline, you know, is an issue, and there are so many different nuances there. And you add in school safety, which is different, but certainly there are some elements there. I just would like for us to start this conversation earlier and spread our communication and participation out beyond the district. So,
Dr. Gant, as you were talking, I'm kind of behind in processing this. I'm already at next year because it seems like we just come up and then it's time for code of conduct again. So I got to think I'll be on the other side, but you know. One thing I'm just thinking about this past year with the number of parents that I had, you know, I worked with on the backside. If there would be a way that we could even, you know, break this code of conduct up into areas that really affect our families. Like, you know, I had a great deal of bullying that I'm still feeling some kind of way about. You know, could there be like a pamphlet, you know, instead of them having to go through the whole, you know, code of conduct, could there be ways that the information could be broken down smaller on a card where parents could know step by step this is what the process is. Going back to what Ms. Davis said about, the appropriateness of making sure it's written in a language that parents can read, just straightforward, step 1, step 2, step 3, because that was totally missing in some of the parents that I, forwarded to the proper people. But that part, I believe, was missing, even if I referred them to the code of conduct. So something that could be straightforward on those areas that we know are issues that come up very frequently. So that's just something that I would like for us to consider, that I think would be helpful as the family engagement think about the parents, something they could just hand to them and kind of go through instead of a whole manual, when this is what we're dealing with.
Thank you. Dr. Anderson, were you going to speak when I?
Oh, I don't remember, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I don't think it was important.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I was just going to say I agree. Dr. Maddox and I have been working with Dr. Watley on really pulling out like 3 really common areas of infractions, or areas that we see are having a strong impact on culture and climate. I've met with Dr. Askew. We've met with our safety and our security team with Dr. Watley to say, where is it that we're seeing the most common areas, and then wanting specific strategies. But what we never even in that conversation thought about, like a pamphlet or a card or a quick info or FAQ kind of document that you could do. So those are good ideas, listening to each of you speak. So I've made note of that, because with Dr. Watley's new position, not new for the district, but new for her, we have been very intentional in kind of some of the expectations on what we want to see around climate. And even an example, we talk about attendance, and that's a big focus for us as a district this year, but attendance could be impacted by bullying. So, we're saying that all of these things can be interwoven, and so we really need to dig down and make sure that we are identifying what some of these root causes are, but then also making sure our families and our students have the tools and resources to know how to appropriately ask for help and how to address issues when they arise. So I've made note of some of the suggestions you all shared, and we'll be sharing that with her as well, because that's kind of one of the priority focus areas for her this year. Dr. Welch is here. They've been working very closely. He'll be presenting next month on some of this same work, and she'll be able to share with you at that time some of the areas that we've identified that are aligned with this conversation.
And one other thing is I'm still not clear where it comes to academic, Mr. Gaskin's side of the house versus Dr. Watley. And when it comes to the discipline and, what happens in those processes, that's another issue. As I was working with families, that I'm still not clear about, how do they work together and how is that bridge. And I know I brought that to you all before, but I really would like that to be clear for everybody, how those two sides work together as it relates to our discipline processes.
I will ask Mr. Gaskins, as I look at him now, to reach out and send an email just to get some clarity. I know we've had some of those conversations before, but if we can get more clarity around where the disconnect is, then we can make sure that we can get that clarity provided.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I think that'll be helpful too for parents too, because, at some point, and I know we'll hear more about this next month, but, you have students that sort of tap out. And I think those are, while it's just a handful, the culture can be significantly impacted, but they're still our students. And so at some point you sort of max out, when a person has been like suspended or expelled, and then it's like, well, what do we do? Like, what do parents see as their options? Even if we've done, this like progressive discipline and we've done these things. And so that's why I think, I'm getting ready to go be circular. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point that, there's a limit here. So that's why it's so important that all of these conversations are happening, not just here.
So my last comment is, could we please have a foreword that talks about what a model student looks like, acts like, and behaves like, so that we can begin this code of conduct with something that people can set their eyes on as a goal, as opposed to, this is what you do, what happens if you don't do it? I think I saw 2 positive statements in there to that effect in the 47 pages that I read. Everything else was punitive, and that's not a code of conduct, that's a code of discipline.
All right, any additional questions before we open the floor for a motion? All right, the floor is open for a motion.
I move that we adopt the revised code of conduct that is on our assembly, right? That has the corrections in it from the public feedback for the school year 22-23, with high anticipation for future changes.
Thank you, Ms. Davis.
Second.
Any follow-up questions or discussion? All right, all in favor of adopting the policy JCDA and the Student Code of Conduct and exhibit, if you would, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so that motion passes 6. And we'll move forward to 2, and this is our policy IKBB, the Divisive Concepts Complaint Resolutions Process.
Yes, thank you. So this is the result of a change or a new Georgia law that actually went into effect July 1st, and it requires a complaint resolution process to be passed by every Board of Education by August 1st. And so the policy that you see on Assembly is what the Georgia School Board Association drafted. Mr. Pruitt was just telling me the State Department of Education was to draft a model policy by July 1st, and they didn't, but the School Board Association did, so that's where this comes from. And you can read about all of the content and definitions of a divisive concept. It does articulate the 3 groups of people who can make a complaint: the parent of a student enrolled at the school where the alleged violation occurred, a student who has reached the age of majority and is enrolled at the school where the alleged violation occurred, or an individual employed as a school administrator, teacher, or other school personnel, again, at the school where the alleged violation occurred. The complaint must be in writing and given to the principal of the school where the alleged violation occurred, and it should provide a reasonably detailed description. The timeline that's in the policy is, I don't know, I thought it was sort of hard to follow, so I wanted to kind of break it out so you could see what the process actually looks like. And so that we would know what it is if there was a complaint that were to be filed. Within 5 days, the principal or designee must investigate, and then unless agreed by with the complaint, within 10 days from the time the complaint is filed, there should be a meeting to discuss whether a violation has occurred or to determine. Then there's a break, and if the complainant requests a written summary of that finding, the written summary must be provided within 3 days. And then again, if the complainant decides to request for review by superintendent, the superintendent has 10 days. So that is the procedure that is outlined in this policy that I did not write, again, but that the Georgia School Board Association drafted pulling from the law. Mr. Pruitt, did I miss anything?
No, that's perfect.
All right, so the other things to note, an individual can actually request records that may substantiate a complaint. this is in the policy, and then not in the policy, but in the law, is that should it get to the State Board of Education after hearing a appeal, if they find that there was a violation that was not properly dealt with, or could lead to a corrective action plan. So there are two things. So this policy is to be in place by August 1st, which would mean that you would vote to take action on the policy this evening. If you want to put it for public comment, as the policy BDC requires, then it would probably not be dealt with until August, but you could suspend the BDC policy that requires it to go for public action this evening and then take action on the policy, which would have the benefit of having it in place by August 1st.
What happens if it's not in place?
Well, we did ask that, and that was not totally clear. I don't think any, I don't know. The Georgia School Board Association said they didn't anticipate that every school board in Georgia would have one in place by August 1st, but that is what is in the law. So they didn't have an answer as to what the penalty is or the punishment.
We're already on probation.
And just for clarity, what we're voting on here is 4.
Well, you're voting on the whole policy. Is that what you're asking for, the complaint procedure?
Well, I guess maybe this is where your legal expertise could help us out here.
Well-
You have to be in agreement with this policy itself in order to vote for all of the items that are in this policy. So if there's a place where you are in a position where you do not agree with this policy at all, but it's a legal requirement that this policy be embedded into your policies, where does that leave a no vote?
So we can't change the content, like we can't change the definitions of divisive concepts, right? So it leaves you in a tough spot. The law says that the school board associations, school boards have to have a complaint resolution process in place if somebody in the categories alleges a violation of any of these actions.
And the law is also asking us to place the complaint process within
Yes,
the policy that was written by the legislature.
correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that we were all clear on
And
what's
so to
happening
be
here.
Right.
clear, I think we can't just have the process, we have to have the definition and all of this. Is that what I hear you, is that what you asked, or is that what I hear you
I
saying?
see what you're asking.
Attorney Pruitt?
In other words, what part of this is necessary, legally necessary and
Oh, I
required?
like that. That's a great question.
So it's all straight from the code section that the General Assembly adopted. The policy just, you have to have some description of what your complaint process is about. The way the code is written is this complaint process applies to subsections A and B above herein. That wouldn't make a lot of sense, and nobody'd know what it meant if you put that in a policy. So just as a matter of common sense, the definitions have been repeated in the policy so you know what the complaint procedure is referring to.
I suppose even if they weren't in the policy, that would be what the complainant would complain about.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the only other thing I can think of is you could say this complaint procedure applies to, what's the statute? Divisive concepts as defined in OCGA 20-1-11, but I mean, it's the
I
same
second that
substance
motion.
either way. Well, I mean, it's the same thing. It's the exact same words.
The words are-
So in many cases, our policies just cite the law, but in the best cases, the policies sort of state the important pieces of the law. Don't you think many of our policies restate the law for clarity,
Exactly. I
rather
agree.
than just refer someone to some database somewhere?
Exactly.
But I understand if you don't want to do that in this policy, just cite the law and send people to the law.
And we can't add to this, that's what I hear you saying, right?
correct.
Ah, okay.
But I
Ms.
heard that-
Gallagher, sorry.
I'm sorry, were you gonna say something?
Yes, I cut her off. I'm sorry. Ms. Gallagher?
So this is a clarifying question. So based on this, decisive concepts only deal with race, not religion or sexual orientation or any of those other things that we run into, just race?
It's all CRT.
So it's basically forcing all boards of education to approve the anti-critical race theory policy.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Mumby, use your microphone.
In my opinion, this policy is regarding the state legislature addressing critical race theory and its instruction or lack thereof, is my opinion, in the school systems in Georgia. And so this is in an effort to tie the hands of teachers who are teaching critical race theory or concepts that could relate to critical race theory, although technically we could all say that that is not happening in our state. And so that's what this is, in my opinion.
Mhm. And in essence, my opinion, this isn't factual either, but it's really, in my opinion, performative, and it's flawed, and it's based in, you know, our issues in our community to not be able to address racism. No one wants to be called, you can call someone anything else, but when you start talking about race, there's an issue, and there are just errors. You know, when you talk about the United States of America is fundamentally racist, that is considered a divisive concept, but it is. And so, like, all of these, you know, there are several of these that I just think, you know, I know we're just talking because it's something that we have to have, but it is one of those things. It is one of those hills for me because it's performative, and it doesn't move the needle forward, particularly as school districts address disparities for Black students and students of color with achievement and discipline.
So when this is voted down, what happens?
Who are you asking?
Our
I
lawyer.
guess me.
Attorney Pruitt, I'm sorry.
So, I mean, that goes to, I guess, there are all sorts of statutes that require you to have all sorts of policies, and that's part of the work that your policy staff person and your policy committee and you do all the time. If you fail to have one of those, what's the penalty? I've never had to deal with that. One remedy would be a mandamus lawsuit that would result in a judgment ordering you to do it because the statute requires it. It's a clear legal duty. Could the state withhold grant funds? In this particular case, the law itself provides for a penalty, as Ms. Bonessa was explaining, that you could have your waivers withdrawn, your charter system waivers withdrawn. So any number of potential penalties.
So we're required to have a policy, we're not required to have this one.
No, you're required to have it. This is word for word what you're required to
This
have.
one.
So when I was thinking about it and thinking, well, what changes could happen, right? I mean, you could change it so the complaint had to be filed, you know, we had to respond in 3 days. I'm not saying this is what you would do, but right, this would be one option if you wanted to say we're trying to make it even more restrictive. I guess that's still why it's a model, right, a sample policy. Some boards might choose to make it say we have to respond in 2 days or something like that. So, but this is as long as it can go according to the law with respect to the complaint process. And then if you take out all of the explanations, as Mr. Pruitt said, it would still be, that is the law, but somebody would have to go look up the law first to see if their whatever divisive concept was if that fell within the law. So it would be perhaps more complicated for those complainants, but it would also be more complicated for those who need to see what is and isn't included.
Did I
All right.
understand you to say that this is, the policy is drafted by GSBA because the state failed to meet their July 1 deadline?
Oh, I don't know if they did it because they may have actually done it even before July 1st.
So is there another one out there floating around?
Not yet.
This is the only one that we have?
That's the only one for now.
And
And
so-
that's not at all unusual. And it's, frankly, you can't really blame the Department of Education. Anytime it's phrased this way, and it's phrased this way in this particular new law as well, the legislature directs the state board to do it. Well, the Department of Education writes things for the state board, but the state board's political appointees, and they don't have the power to force them to do it. So, for example, the legislature directed the state board to implement a regulation on transportation of students in certain criteria by 8-passenger vans by July 1 of last year. They still haven't done it. It's not uncommon.
Thank you.
All right, so if there are no additional questions or comments, the floor is open. From my understanding, we would have to vote to first suspend the rules, which I think is a 2/3 vote, and then if that passes, the floor would then be open for a motion to take action on the policy IKBB. So the floor is open first for a motion to suspend the rules.
Can I make a comment before we make a motion?
Mhm.
Just that, our policies are fluid. Anytime we can go in and change them. So if we suspend the rules and put this policy in place, we could still ask for public comment. It'll be in place, and then if we get lots of public comments with ideas about how to revise it, we can revise it next month. So it's not, our policies are they're changeable. It's not carved into stone. So if we put this in, I'm just trying to make it a little bit easier to put this in and follow the law, since we kind of probably should do that, and then talk about it and develop it further if we want to.
Okay.
I like that idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yeager. The floor is open for a motion to suspend the rules.
I think the ad hoc committee should.
I move that we suspend, remind me which rule we're suspending this?
BDC.
BBC, and not ask for public comment on this policy before we vote to approve it.
Oh, well, first we just have to suspend. Oh, okay. So is the motion to suspend the rules?
To suspend the rules, yeah.
Okay.
But which rule I was trying to suspend was the one that we have to put something up for public comment
Okay,
for
I
a
see.
month before we vote.
Okay. So we have a motion by Dr. Yeager to suspend the rules so that we can take action on policy IKBB. Is there a second?
I have an amendment to the motion. That we suspend the rules for advancing the policy without that we suspend the rule and advance the policy without public comment, but we still send it out for public comment. Does that make sense? Yes.
Could you clarify that?
So currently, we do not vote for anything until the public comment period has expired. So my suggestion is that we suspend the rule to go ahead and advance it while public comment is still coming in, is still open. Does that make sense? We go ahead and advance suspend the rules so that we can go ahead and approve the policy, but allow public comment to proceed.
Okay. So we have an amendment to that motion, but it's still to suspend the rules, which is what we will need to take action on this. All right?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've got it.
Thank you.
It's basically to suspend the rules with the condition that it be sent out for public comment after the vote.
Yes, thank you. You do that so well.
Okay. So we have a motion to suspend the rules. Is there a second? And that it's sent out for public comment immediately after the vote is taken?
So can I second her
Mm-hmm.
friendly amendment?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I second that.
All right, so Dr. Yeager, second. Any follow-up questions about that motion to suspend the rules? All right, all in favor of suspending the rules and sending this out immediately for public comment, if you would, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that was 3 in favor, and all opposed, if you would show the same signs. Aye. So I think what that means is that that doesn't pass.
Right, there were 3 for, 3 against, and 1 abstention, is that right? Or was it 3, either way, either way it does not pass. You need a majority to pass it.
It was 3-3. It was,
It's 3-3.
okay, so the motion failed for it to suspend the rules with the assumption that it would have been sent out for public comment. So that motion failed. I don't know what the rest of the conversation is, but should we move forward?
The only other avenue would be if anybody has another motion to suspend the rules with or without any other conditions attached to it. If not, then we move on.
Okay, are there any other motions that are different from, are there any other motions of suspending the rules that are different than the one that Ms. Davis offered?
Can I ask a question? So those that don't want to suspend the rules, does that mean you want to put the policy up for public comment for a month before we vote on it? Is that, am I understanding that correctly?
Yes.
Even though it will mean we'll be out of,
We'll miss the August deadline. You
we'll
agree with
miss
that?
the deadline.
The August deadline as far as, can I?
Yeah, okay.
The August deadline, as far as I can tell, we got this policy less than a month ago, 3 weeks ago. We have not had an opportunity to engage in this policy. We have not had an opportunity to engage our community in this policy. Therefore, in my opinion, we are not doing our due diligence in engaging the community in this policy, and the state legislature, as far as I'm concerned, should have that understanding that no one received this policy from GSBA or from the Georgia Board of Education, Georgia Department of Education in a timely manner. And so I think that we should follow our process as a Board of Education and engage the community in this policy. So I don't want to suspend anything and vote on it now before we have had an opportunity to hear from our community.
So if I may, and I neglected to say this, but that would be another possible motion, is to approve this to put out for public comment in the normal process.
And I think we don't have to vote to send it to public comment. We can put it out for public comment.
I'm sorry, I forgot. The procedure changed, and you don't have to vote for that anymore.
Right, and so now we have where we haven't taken action, or we have, but we haven't approved the suspension of the rules, so that then this could, and so that's where we're sort of back at.
Yep, we're at number 7. We will post the information on the district website to alert employees and the public to the proposed policy and the opportunity to submit comments.
And it automatically goes there if we don't do anything else with it anyway. Dr. Yeager, to answer your question, I think you asked, did you ask why or if something would change?
I was just trying to understand the logic of the board members who voted not to suspend. I just want to make sure I understood what that what that meant and what the vision was for moving forward.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
I heard Dr. Anderson's, her explanation, but you're welcome to give me yours as well.
Yeah, I definitely think public feedback would be helpful. But I will say, even then, I would find it very hard to support this for a variety of different reasons, some of which I've stated. I don't know that that's in the majority view of the
I think
board.
it's terrible too, but it's the law, right? So are we going to civil disobedience, break the law? If that's the position of the board, that's the position of the board.
Well, and I think that's where so when you asked why, yes, I am. It's one of those things that I feel very strongly about. We have discrimination policies, we have statements, and I wasn't a fan of a resolution for CRT and all of the things that are going, that are happening where this is politicizing performance. And it's not about being a fan. I just won't support it. And so I don't know what that means. I don't know what the board's position will be, but that's what my position is. And so, yes, even if it is not legally sound or whatever, I probably wouldn't support this.
I appreciate that.
I'm kind of lost in our revision. So at this point, this policy is written by GSBA, it's going out for public comment, is that right? And then the next item, which was to vote on policy IKBB, is not an item for us to address tonight because
That's right.
this policy is out for public comment.
Right,
Because
for
you-
30 days.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, if we're ready to move on, all hearts and minds are clear.
Thank you. I look forward to bringing more enthusiastically supported policies. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Bonas. All right, we'll move forward.
Hold on, let me find something. Not you. Thank you, Ms. Bonis. Okay, so I'm looking in Assembly to see how many other districts have actually approved this one. I haven't said anything.
There are 5.
There are 5 out of 159 counties with a lot more school districts. So I don't think we're the only ones having this conversation.
All right, thank you all. So we'll move forward to personnel recommendations. Dr. Thomas?
Yes, ma'am. It is my recommendation that, I don't know, do you all want to do 8.3 separately, or do you want to do?
I think we discussed 8.3 and we're fine with
Okay.
moving it under the.
So it's my recommendation that items 8.1, 8.2, and the new 8.3 be accepted as recommended. You all did receive resumes for the individuals at the levels that you had requested and higher prior to tonight. So I would recommend that 8.1, 8.2, and 8.3 be accepted.
Could I add a little bit of clarification? I'm sorry, Dr. Thomas.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Maddox was not here when we had that conversation, and so Dr. Maddox, just for clarity, we moved item 13 to 8.3, and that pertains to the superintendent's 3% raise in accordance with the way that her contract is written. It's required that the Board of Education vote for that.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson and Dr. Gant.
Okay, so the recommendations have been put before us for items 1, 2, and 3. The floor is open for a motion.
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I second.
Okay, any follow-up questions? Ms. Gallagher? Oh, okay. All right, all in favor of approving the board report, the personnel board report, and item 3, the personal action, if you would, raise your hands and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Were there any opposed? Okay. That motion passes 6-0. We'll move forward to the action to approve field trips.
I move that the field trip, that was a good one, that was the, yes, the cheerleaders field trip, that'd be approved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Ms. Davis, a second by Ms. Gallagher. Any follow-up questions? All right, all in favor of approving the field trips, if you would, raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay, that motion passes 6-0. We will move forward to item 10. This is the action to appoint District 1 board member. Just to provide some context, we have had some conversation around filling the seat, the District 1 seat. Previously, the board has done a process by which we extend an application and then we take applicants, but that was one of the board's options. It's within the board's prerogative to also appoint a person, and so this is the information for a District 1 representative. Heidi is also, so Mr. Pruitt created a resolution for us to take action on, and from my understanding, this will start the process. Mr. Pruitt, do you mind giving just an overview of that process?
Sure, glad to. So once you approve that, if you approve this, then at some point Ms. Hensley needs to sign that affidavit, but primarily I will send your approved resolution to the state school superintendent, the governor, and the Secretary of State. Secretary of State will issue what's called a dedimus you're all familiar with to the clerk of court, Beverly Logan. She will, once she gets that, she'll contact Ms. Hensley, swear her in, and that's the point she's official and can vote on the board.
Thank you. Any questions about that? All right, and so we have both the resolution before us and the affidavit to take action on for Heidi Hensley, who is the person that would be serving anyway come January. So the floor is open for a motion.
So moved. So moved.
Second.
Sorry, I moved that we approve. Sorry, I move that we approve the action to appoint District 1 board member Heidi Hensley to the vacant position.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Second by Dr. Yeager. Any follow-up questions? All right, all in favor of appointing District 1 board member Heidi Hensley?
My brain don't move that fast. You're going too fast. When did she start?
So a lot of it will be dependent on when this process that Mr. Pruitt explained occurs.
Right. Mostly, the most time usually is, as some of you know, is with the Secretary of State's office, how quickly they issue the dedimus. But as soon as Ms. Logan gets that from them, she's very prompt, and she'll contact Ms. Hensley and get her sworn in, and that's when she takes her seat and can start voting.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And I can't remember if I mentioned this or not, but she won't be available to start before that school, before school starts back. But this is the process that we're hoping within the next, will take no more than a month, but this starts the process. So all in favor of approving Heidi Hensley or appointing District 1 board member as Heidi Hensley, if you would, raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? So that That motion passes 6-0. We'll move forward to item 11, and this is a discussion of a time limit for board member responses. Just to provide some context, with the goal of having our meetings, particularly and specifically our business meetings, to run more efficiently and to move conversation along, I want to open the floor for a discussion for time limits. And so one of the things that I think I've shared is that, you know, often when we have most months are not like this month, meaning that our work session and our board meetings are not typically just one. And so sometimes, you know, we do find ourselves in long meetings. And while the work session is an opportunity to ask questions, to try to get to as much information as we can so that we can make an informed decision the following week, sometimes the following week, the business meetings are also extended. And so this discussion item is a request for my board colleagues to consider putting limits around the time that we discuss items. Generally, most of the items, about 95% of the time, are agenda items that were also listed on our work session agenda. There are times when things are added, but I think some of that also has to fall back to the district, you know? So if we are having to take action on things that are, you know, needing to be added, then that, you know, put some of the work back in their laps and some of the work in our laps to be sure that we have the information we need and that we take action on it. From my understanding, this is just a discussion. So in Robert's Rules of Order, I think it does give us the option to put some time parameters. One of the things that, you know, Mr. Pruitt shared that I had not thought about is that, you know, this would probably be something. Is not an action item because it would probably be something that we would want to place in policy as well to go through that process. And so that's why hopefully that provides a little context for why I would like for you to consider these things. The floor is open for thoughts, opinions, questions.
So I think it seems relatively broad to just say discussion of time limit for board member responses. And again, so if we're talking about an item that we're taking action on, right? When we're at that place that we're taking action, that probably means that we've already been through a work session and had some discussion on that. That makes perfectly good sense to me that we would limit that unless something major came up that changed direction, right? Something. So I'm fine with that. If we're talking about something like CRT that dropped in our laps, not really dropped in our laps because they've been warning us that this was coming for months, right? And so we kind of known that it was coming. And so we never had any discussions about it prior to now. So we didn't do anything preemptive. And so even when we get the public comment, the board really hasn't discussed it so much in terms of, you know, where do we stand on that? How do we look at that policy, what we want to see on that? This is a good example to even see what a time limit looks like. And what thoughts are we entertaining on this, and what would be the thing that would trigger those thoughts? In this case, we've got a policy that came to us that we obviously didn't like. And so do we have further discussion about that, or what's our next step on that? Do we need to repeat what we said tonight? So let's maybe, for me, just to help me, for clarity, I need to understand what it is we're talking about. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Dr. Yeager?
Yeah, I think I agree with Linda that we don't have good ways of communicating with each other outside the board meetings. We don't have, most people don't respond to emails, group emails. You know, we have a Slack channel or any kind of an internal communication system that people use easily. We started a texting this month, which I think helps a little bit, but we don't, as a board, have very good mechanisms for having conversations with each other. I think we were improving on individual conversations with Dr. Thomas. That's been a change that we put in place this year, which helps a lot, keeps us on the same page anyway. But I don't think with each other we have much of interactions. We're all very busy. We're all, focused on everything else. And so when we come together, it tends to be the time when we want to chat with each other about how we feel about these policies, or whatever issues. So it is challenging. At the same time, we've been told by everyone we've spoken to that our board meetings are much too long and not efficient. And so somehow we have to find a way, and I'm not sure what that is, to communicate with each other better before the board meetings, so that when we have the board meetings, we don't have to have all of the convoluted conversations. And I think committees sort of serve that purpose, but I totally agree that the committees were not open to everyone, and good notes from the committee meetings weren't provided to the full board, so that wasn't effective among everybody. So I'm not sure I don't think that's the solution, but having time outside the board meetings to talk to each other seems like a really important thing we need to strive for.
Thank you, Dr. Yeager and Ms. Davis.
So we did have a discussion many months ago about having a mentoring system. And so Dr. Maddox brought that back up to us, and we had a discussion about what you're saying, having means and a more formalized process where we have conversations with each other as small groups outside, where we're not consensus building, but we are having discussions. So I think that may partially help solve some of that. I think that, including texting as a way of communication, and perhaps having a discussion about including Slack as another way of communicating may be helpful. But I don't think that this policy should be, or I don't think that this discussion should be happening at the same time that we're talking about having more robust conversations beyond the work session. Because I think the work session is the place where we have the robust conversations, but the board meeting is a business meeting. And so I think that those are kind of two completely different conversations, and this discussion should not be spilling over into how we more effectively and better communicate as a team, because we still need to figure out how to run our business meetings better.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. Ms. Gallagher, Dr. Maddox, any feedback, thoughts? Okay. All right, so I think what I hear, Ms. Gallagher?
What are we putting time on? A response to each item?
So yes, at the business meetings, not the work sessions.
Okay. So if questions weren't answered in the week, in the 5 business days that are between meetings, and I only get 2-3 minutes at a business meeting before I have to vote on something, that's it. If the questions aren't answered in the 5 days between the meetings, that's what I'm saying. And then we get to the business meeting, and I only get 3 minutes to get clarity on something I'm supposed to vote on. Then I want to encourage my fellow board members not to question me on why I am voting no on everything, because I don't want to vote yes on anything without clarity. Thank you.
I think that's fair, and this is just beginning that discussion, depending on what I'm sensing, and I don't know what I'm sensing. I think a few of us are okay with moving forward and looking at this from a policy standpoint, and maybe a couple are sort of on the fence. But yeah, that's sort of where where I am with it, and I would just want to also agree with what Dr. Anderson said, that, you know, our business meetings, really at that point, we're taking action. And when we had committees, our meetings were long. We've had 5 and 6 hour long meetings. And I don't think that we can be as effective as we want to be when our meetings get that long. If we don't have the answers that we need, then at some point you take a vote up or down. And that communicates to the district that I need more information, or collectively we need more information, or it can, you know, sort of encourage that communication, you know, the two-way communication, that I have these questions that haven't been answered. But having, you know, the extended meetings still doesn't necessarily mean that we leave like fully feeling, we leave tired, but it doesn't mean that we fully feel like we have, you know, like those answers. So, Ms. Davis?
So would we have the ability in this time session or time comment period to simply do as we do on consent? If we don't want something on consent, we simply say pull it, and we don't have to give an explanation? Because again, if it's something to take action on and we're not ready, then can we stop the action? Or do we continue to do, as Ms. Gallagher is suggesting, you know, just vote no? If we can't have the discussion to get the clarity, then, yeah, I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I want to be clear, this is not about not having a discussion to get clarity.
Right.
At some point, conversations become circular, almost like what's happening now. You know, we're saying the same things in our opinions, and, you know, it's not productive. And, you know, if we decide not to move forward with this policy, I will respect the will of the board.
So is it a policy or a norm?
It's not,
And
well,
if it's already in Robert's rules, why are we having to create something around it?
I think when we spoke, and Mr. Pruitt, maybe if you don't mind backing me up or helping me out or letting me know I'm wrong, I think policy just sort of helps add some teeth to our practice.
That's exactly right. I mean, Robert's rules are somewhat vague about the presiding officer's power to control, there's powers to control the flow of the meeting, but as far as imposing speaking time limits, if there's not an internal rule of what that limit is, then she really wouldn't be in a position to win a point of order vote on enforcing that limit, because it's not a specific limit that's in your policy and your internal rules. So, yeah, I mean, that would be another approach, is to have it as a norm and hope that all board members abide by it. But it's just a hope unless it's specified in the policy.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I'm wondering.
Thank you.
I was just going to say that, of course, this is board decision, but I would hope that it would encourage us to take advantage of the time for discussion in work sessions, and then take advantage of the opportunity for the 6 or 7 days after work session, if there are still points of clarity or discussion or concern that could be provided by members of cabinet or other staff members. Sometimes I feel like we have questions and then we wait until we come back to the entire next regular meeting, and we kind of circle back around, and some of those areas of confusion could be cleared up during the week to help those next meetings be more efficient when we move forward. So if we have the discussion in our work session, and then we identify areas where people could benefit from one-on-one conversations, sitting, talking on the phone with a cabinet member or another staff person, then we are available for that, to try to help provide clarity, answer questions, and to do what we can do to assist the individual board member with what they need prior to having to come to the regular meeting.
Thank you so much. What she said, I was trying to find a way to put that thought out there, but I would like to see us be more intentional when we come to our board meetings. So I do support this, and thank you, what she said.
Thank you, Dr. Maddox.
So is there a general consensus? I know there are three of us that I think are in support of beginning to explore some policy options. Dr. Thomas, since I know it sort of still rests with you all. But there are three others here. Okay. All right, well, if you would explore our policy options.
Yes, Ms. Bonet, you have that?
This
That we
is
would like to-
policy BC, board meetings.
What policy, what did you say, Dr. Yeager?
B as in boy, C as in carrot. BC.
Okay. All right, well, thank you all. We'll move forward to item 12. This is executive session. And just as a reminder, we don't have the 13. We moved that up and we already took action. So the floor is open for a motion to discuss or deliberate upon the appointment, employment, compensation, hiring, disciplinary action, or dismissal, or periodic evaluation, or rating of a public officer or employee, or to interview applicants for the position of superintendent.
So moved. I move that we move to executive session.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? All right, all in favor of entering into executive session, if you would raise your hands and say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we are going into executive session at 8:04.